Debbie Montgomery Johnson is a woman on a mission. In her book, The Woman Behind the Smile, she shares her personal experience with a love that turned into betrayal and financial disaster, and she removes the mask of shame and shows others how to do the same. Many of us have something we're hiding, something we're ashamed of, something that's through no fault of our own or through our own making, something that we keep hidden, and that in turn keeps us hidden from each other and the world. Debbie's background is quite diverse. She worked as a paralegal and a bank branch manager, was an Air Force officer, U.S. Air Force, serving as intelligence officer at the Pentagon, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and in Germany. And just like you, she's a woman on a mission to live an authentic, joyful life as the woman with the smile rather than behind it. Welcome, Debbie.
Thank you so much. I'm very glad to be here.
Well, I'm not sure what your story is all about, so I'm on a discovery mission along with our listeners. And I guess we should start. It's all about online dating, right?
I would go there, and it's an interesting thing, and I'm for it, and I'm against it. It was an amazing adventure for me. I launched into online dating very carefully. Actually, my husband passed away 6 years ago, and I worked and worked and worked, and that's all I did. My life was work. And some friends of mine, about 6 or 8 months after Lou died, said, you need to do something more. You need to get out and get a life again. And I really didn't like dating as a kid, and I didn't want to start dating as a 52-year-old. So online dating was an alternative that I thought was maybe safe, and it's something that I could do a little bit at a time from the safety of my home. And so I kind of dipped my toe in, and that's how I started, just kind of looking and stalking and seeing what was out there.
And what was your experience like? I mean, did your friends and family go along with all of this?
Well, it was funny because my friends were really excited. They thought this would be great because you could see who's out there and what's out there. And actually, I was a little disappointed because I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, I didn't get out and party, that kind of stuff. So I wasn't a bar type of a person. So I looked around, and there were some interesting people. There were some not so interesting, like regular life. My brothers were a little concerned. My parents were like, "Oh, just try it. Just see what you can find." And when I got out there, and I thought I went to the safe sites, sites that were men that I thought might be well educated and business type people and things like that. I felt like I could do that, and so I a little bit at a time I put my profile out there. I made it as perfect as I could. I made sure I had the best pictures, and I presented my life well. I didn't want to overwhelm anybody because I have 4 children, and the youngest was 15 at the time and went from 15 to 23. So most of the kids weren't home, but some people don't want to get encumbered with someone else's kids. And so I was really careful about how I presented myself. But I did put out there that I had been widowed and that I owned a business. And I probably wouldn't do that again if I were to pursue this ever again, because I think you just have to be really careful about putting too much of your life out there. But my friends went along with it, and they thought it was fun. And when I finally did get to hear from a few people, they thought that was terribly exciting.
Well, a couple of things you mentioned. Number one, a friend of mine was, and we're a lot older than you, but she was started online dating, and she's a year older than I am. And I said to her, well, my husband passed away 8 years ago, and maybe this is something I should do, but I'm always afraid that if I put myself out there as the real me, people will be interested just for what I have, not for who I am. And she said, oh, Gail, they don't want someone like you. She said, people our age want someone to take care of them, stay home, cook them dinner. And she said, that's not you. And I said, for sure, that's not me. I said, I never did it before, and I'm not going to do it now. But it's interesting because lately on Facebook, I would tell you the last 15 requests that I have had for friends are from people who say, I don't know if they are, they aren't, they are in the military, they all live abroad, and they are all widowed. And I have not accepted any of them as friends. So,
well, I would guess that every one of them is a scam.
And they've got great pictures. They've got great pictures in uniform, and different people and so forth, but there was just not enough of a history there. I went and looked at their posts, and every single post they have is a picture of themselves. There's no dialogue in there at all. There's no friendships in there at all, and so I just never befriended them. But let's get back to Debbie here. So
Okay.
now you
Well, just a side note on that, though, Gail, is that most folks that have been in the military, myself included, are very proud of where we served and who we served with. And we would have our background on our profiles, or we would have pictures of our companies or our friends on profiles. And those fellows that are not putting them on there, they're not for real. I mean, I had some of those too on LinkedIn. When I first got onto LinkedIn, I had several. I'm like, what is it? It's like, am I a magnet for these kind of guys? But they're not for real. And the pictures, how they can be gorgeous. I mean, the fella that I was in a relationship with, quote unquote, for 2 years was a handsome, handsome man from Britain, and it just he was just lovely. But they take pictures from other people's profiles and put them on as their own.
well,
It's
that's
very,
I
very
figured.
involved.
So you call this person Eric,
Hmm.
and is there anything you could have done to vet him any better?
You know, it was interesting because my background, I had legal background, I had the military background, I had banking background, I had such good training in people, and my people skills were great. But I think the hardest thing, I mean, because I had the little red flags, but my heart was so engaged in this that after a while my heart ruled my head. And even though there were times throughout the 2-year adventure that I actually pursued, I wanted to see if his lawyer was really registered in London, and I wrote to the people in London that registered lawyers, and I got a letter back saying, nope, we don't have a guy named Peter. I can't remember his last name now. But I rationalized why they didn't have it. I figured, well, maybe he's an independent, and he and Eric travel, and there was a reason for it. And I contacted the company that Eric worked for, but he was a contractor, so they didn't have any idea who he was. I'm thinking, well, there must be a reason for it, because he wouldn't tell me he was doing something if it wasn't true. So multiple times through the years, I did check, but I just, for some reason, I ignored the negative responses I was getting back, because I just obviously had no idea that he was deceiving me. And so I just felt like there's got to be a reason why it's not adding up. My
So did
logical
you
mind
ever
should have
meet
known better, but go
did
ahead.
you ever meet him?
I didn't meet him in person ever. And I honestly, I talked to him on the phone, and he had a British accent. I saw the pictures. I had multiple pictures of him, and we instant messaged every day for hours and hours and hours. So I never met him in person. There were many times through the 2 years that he was supposed to get here, and we got hotel reservations and we got airline reservations, and at the last minute had to cancel. So there
So
were ups and downs, tremendous ups and downs throughout the whole thing.
so did he ever ask you for money?
He did, and it started slowly. And it's really interesting. I was just reading an article in a magazine about this whole online dating thing, and I didn't realize that it's been studied so much that there's a pattern to what these guys do. And he did ask me for a little bit of money at the beginning, and it was basically to help one of his friends get onto the online dating site we were on. For some reason, his credit card wasn't working, so they wanted me to send in a check. And I was like, well, what the heck? It was just a few dollars. I said, sure. Well, I did that, and then after a few weeks, something came up with the business. He was overseas. Actually, I thought he was here in Houston when we first met, and then he got a big contract over in Malaysia. So he was traveling. He was on this great adventure around the world, and throughout, something would happen, and it would either be a power of attorney thing that he would need, and long story short, yes, I did send him a little bit of money at first. Typically through MoneyGrams or the wire service. It was like under $2,500, and I did a couple of those. And then through the years, the job was he was working for some Indians, and he was involved in hardwood trees and moving great amounts of trees and lumber. And I understood that because I actually my husband invested in hardwood trees in Costa Rica, so it was uncanny that I had an investment in the type of business he actually was doing. which also gave him legitimacy in my mind because I'm thinking, well, heck, I've got hardwood trees. I understand this whole thing. And so he had some issues with shipping and with all sorts of different things
So how much
throughout the
money,
years.
Debbie, did you end up giving him?
Over 2 years, I gave him just over $1 million.
$1 million. Oh my
And
God.
I know the audience is just going, but it
Yeah.
was little by little. It wasn't all at one time.
So how did you find out you'd gotten scammed?
Well, on almost 2 years, 2 years to the date, it was September 10th, which was uncanny. It was right before 9/11. He came online, and it was an early morning conversation, and he said, I have to ask you something. How do you feel about forgiveness? What do you feel is important about forgiveness? And he and I, over the years, had very spiritual experiences and talks and whatever, so I got my spiritual hat on, and I told him everything I felt about forgiveness and how important it was for the person that had offended and the person that was, had been offended and the person being offended, and we just went on for hours. And then I turned around after a while and I said, why are you asking me this? And he said, because I have something very important to tell you. I have a confession to make. And I'm like, okay. And he said, this has all been a scam. For 2 years, this has been a scam. And all of a sudden, I couldn't believe it. I said, no, you're lying. This can't possibly be true. You've been part of my life for 2 years. We have family, and I know your kid, your son, and your sister. And he goes, no, this is not. This has been a scam, and I have to ask for your forgiveness. And I said, I'm not going to believe it until I see you. And silly me, I didn't realize that you could Skype or Yahoo Instant Message with pictures and video. And he said, turn on your computer. Well, I was on the computer, because he said, go to Yahoo Instant Message, and there's a little camera or something in the corner. I haven't used it since. But I did that, and he came on, and I saw I saw this man on my screen, and it was nothing like the Eric that I had fallen in love with for 2 years. And I'm looking at this man, and he wasn't 55 and a Brit. He was actually 32 and a young fellow from Nigeria. And at that instant, my heart, I flipped, my brain switched. I was back to the intel person, the banker, the legal person. I'm sitting there saying, how in the world did this happen? Because in an instant, the last 2 years was gone, completely gone. And it was just a figment of my imagination. It was just a story at that point. And I'm looking at this man saying to myself, how am I going to get my money back? What is this all about? And honestly, I had my cell phone, and I was trying to take a picture of my screen on my cell phone so I'd get a picture of him so that I could take it to the authorities. But I didn't want him to see me doing that, because he didn't want me to turn him in. He didn't want to go to jail. And at that point, I just started to ask him. I said, how did you do this? And why did you do this? And why did you tell me? That was the most amazing thing, because I knew at that point he could have just walked away and never have revealed himself to me. And he looked at me and he said, I fell in love with you. Over those 2 years, you're such a good person. I just fell in love with you. And I couldn't walk away without asking for you to forgive me for what I've done. And I hope that you can. And if you can't, I understand that. But please don't put me in jail, because I do have my siblings. And he was taking care of his siblings, if that's the real story. And we went on from there.
So what did you do, Debbie? What did you do after the fact? What have you done since then and up till today?
Well, after the fact, immediately I called my parents, because my mom and dad, I'd gotten them involved. And they live over in Tampa. It's about 4 hours away. They came over the next day because they knew I was devastated again. And the reason I was devastated this time, more so than when my husband died, is because I was such a willing participant in this. And I just felt so stupid and so used and everything. And I didn't know how to proceed. So my mom and dad came over, and throughout this whole thing, it was uncanny, but I had journaled everything. I had copied and pasted every email, every instant chat, everything I had into an online journal, and I printed it thinking that it was going to be my family history. Little did I know it would turn into evidence. So I had 5 volumes of my journal, and I had a 3-ring binder full of the wire transactions, all the receipts and stuff from the banks and all these things. So I had incredible evidence. And we went to the FBI here in Palm Beach, because I got online and I read that there's a unit called ICE, which is the Internet Complaint People, and I